Today we are looking at the Gainsaying of Korah, but instead of turning to Jude, we're going to start right where Korah's passage began. That's Numbers 16. And while you are turning there, let me just say regarding Jude's, remember we looked at Cain, we looked at Balaam, we're looking at Korah. And the Gainsaying of Korah, if you have a Bible that is a Bible we call the 26 translations, all of the translators used the word rebellion, rebelled, or rebelliousness in terms of what the King James in the New Testament translated gainsaying. The Greek word for gainsaying is antilogia. And the reason why, that's, to me, it sums it all up. If you spoke Greek, study Greek, understand Greek, it sums it up. Ante, against. And again, when I tell you these definitions, they're simplified. I'm not going to give you the exhaustive. We could spend an hour simply looking at one word. I've done that before. I spent 1 hour looking at a comma, if you remember. But the point here is that there are other words that could have been used by the writer. One Greek word is, you'll recognize this, antithesis. We get our English word antithesis, right? There's another word, or even simply stasis, which is sedition, or episustasis, which is uprising. But those words were not used by Jude. Antilogia. Think of Antichrist. Antichrist, that's your prefix, ante, and logia, from a derivative from the leg and log words that bring us back to the spoken word. It is kind of interesting that if you were studying the Septuagint, which is the Greek version of the Hebrew Bible done 200 to 300 years before Christ, it's interesting that if you were to look up in the specific concordance for the Septuagint, antilogia is used to translate the word meribah from something that happens in the Old Testament. It's kind of interesting that essentially we have a little bit different use of it, but the same application, ante, against, and logia, the word. And if I wanted to just give you the message right now and sum it up in 30 seconds or less, think of being against the word. And if we think about the word, the New Testament sense would be against the word, the logos, which is Christ. But Christ was not yet come in the flesh, so the only thing that the people had was the word that had been revealed by God to Moses to give to the people. So think of it, we could make an application today and just say there are many people who are antilogia. They are against the word of Christ. They are against the logos. They don't want to know about it. They don't care about it. They don't want to hear about it. There are other people who are in the church, and their issue is they know about the church, but they don't really care about the word, the logos. It's more, I'll join a church, I've said this before, for social interactions, social clubs, activities, but not for the prime thing, the logos, the word. So we can begin to make some applications right away, but I'm going to start right into the passage, and you're going to have to bear with me. I will interrupt myself. It's always good when you do it yourself versus somebody else. To add in some things here and there that are important, that if you want to add them into the margins, they actually give substance to this very familiar passage. So, number 16, and Korah, the son of Ishar, the son of Kohath, the son of Levi, and Dathan and Abiram, the sons of Eliab. Let me just stop right there. Korah, important note to self, Korah is first cousin to Moses. Why is this important? Because as we get in, we're going to see my Bible has a header saying Korah's rebellion. You know, it's usually the people that are closest to you that do this. This is why I think Christ in the New Testament quotes that passage from the Old about the one that sat at his table and ate bread, lifted up his heel against him. That familiarity that breeds contempt, and it's usually the ones that are close. And I will tell you, as my experience in ministry, not just in the pulpit, but by the side of my late husband, watching close by, it's usually those people who are real close, who for whatever the reason, and I would tend to say usually it is a bad spirit that comes upon them, but these are usually the ones. And so Korah is, first, a relative. Secondly, it's important, so I make sure everybody's following along with me. Korah has a special position. If you want to know what his special position is, he and his family, just turn back a couple of chapters to Numbers 3. I'm not trying to make you all read the Bible like a woman. And somebody will complain that I said that. But listen, I am no respecter of gender. I don't even want to know about the middle door. When you come here, God is not interested in if you are a man or a woman, black, white, yellow, green, a Martian from some other planet. He's only interested in one thing, you knowing about his son, Jesus Christ, the shed blood that was spilt for your sins and mine, that he rose and he's coming back again. And in the meantime, that you learn about God's ways through his word. That's the main importance here. So forgive me, I get a little bit animated on that subject because it's very close to my heart. But if you want to know what exactly Korah and his family here, in Numbers 3 and verse 12, it says, "And I, behold," this is the Lord speaking to Moses, "have taken the Levites from among the children of Israel, instead of all the firstborn that openeth the matrix among the children of Israel. Therefore the Levite shall be mine." So from the get-go, Korah's got a special standing with God in that God declared that that tribe of Levi belonged to him. They'd have no land, they'd have no anything, but they were his. So just kind of put that as one beginning note. "Because all the firstborn are mine, for on the day that I smote all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, I hallowed unto me all the firstborn in Israel, both man and beast. Mine shall they be, I am the Lord." So he says, these are mine. "Number the children of Levi, after the house of their fathers, by their families, make every male from a month old and upward, shalt thou number them." And Moses numbered according to the word of the Lord. And these were the sons of Levi by their names, Gershon, Kohath, and Merari. So you can see right away there, Kohath is, as I just read to you out of Numbers here, the son Korah, son of Ishar, son of Kohath. So you've got grandfather Kohath, and go 2 down, you get to Korah. And Korah, as I said, is first cousin to Moses. So relative, special position. And I'm back in number 16. So you've got Korah and Dathan and Abiram, who are essentially in that same group. And read very carefully, because after Eliab, and it says, "and On," the son of Peleth, the sons of Reuben took men. So 2 things are happening here. You've got the religious positioned people, and then Reuben and his lot. Now, this is another sidebar that you can pick out and kind of put some attention towards. If you remember, Reuben would, when they positioned the camp, Reuben would be in the middle of Gad and Simeon on the south side of the tabernacle. And when they moved, I'm sure it would always be a thorn, a strong reminder that Reuben, or the descendants of Reuben, forfeited the birthright blessing as the firstborn because of the sin that was committed. That birthright was then passed on, we know, Judah, and then subsequently on to Joseph and his lineage. So there has to be a couple of things going on. Maybe a little talk between the head clans of the Reubenites and Korah and his band, And it's always like this. The ones out of Reuben's group, 250, I believe, it says 250 princes, famous in the congregation, that's verse 2, men of renown. So it's always like this. You'll get people who have been given a position by God. It doesn't happen in every position, but it happens frequently. And suddenly, that position goes to their head. You know, yesterday I was cleaning toilets somewhere, and nobody saw me cleaning the toilets, and I whistled while I worked, and then, you know, I get a promotion now. I'm head greeter at the door. Everybody sees me first. I'm important because I'm at the front of the line, and I greet you. Hi, how you doing? Hi, how you doing? Hi, how you doing? You know me? I know you because when you come, I'm the first one you see. I'm important here. I've got standing, right? That's what happens a lot of times, especially in the church. Don't know why. It's really kind of a unique thing, but so let's see what they did. It says they rose up before Moses with certain of the children of Israel, 250 princes of the assembly, famous in the congregation, men of renown, rose up before Moses. This is where I say cowards love cowards. Because see, Korah's going to have an issue with Moses and Aaron. But if Korah was spiritually decent, he would have gone to Moses and said, Moses, can I have a word with you? You know, when you're not busy getting instructions from God. One-on-one, let me tell you, I got a problem here. You know, I tend the tabernacle because that's my thing. But, you know, I really think I should be a special higher-ranking priest and have some position like you and Aaron have. Now, if he was spiritually decent, just a shred of decency, he would have gone straight to Moses and addressed the thing straight to Moses. This is biblical. The New Testament says that you address something one-on-one first. You bring it to that one first before you go and tell it to the church. Korah obviously spread his poison to 250 men of renown. It's always like this. The cowards usually line up with people in the church, usually the ones who have prominence. And I like to, you know, put flesh and blood on things. So when I first was sitting in the church on the front row, there were some folks on the front row with me that we'll call them prominent to the degree of maybe one was a minister's daughter, and maybe one was a first family in the church, and, you know, you go down the line, maybe one was a doctor, and maybe one was a lawyer, who knows, right? And it's always like this. The ones that are going to start some form of dissension, they'll always gravitate towards the people who they think have the power or the money, the support. Because when they go, they're not happy to just go out the door and go do something else. They got to poison. In this case, 250 people are poisoned with Korah's unhappy, discontent, whatever his issues are. 250 people have to get poisoned for his issues. Now, if you think that this is just a problem in Numbers or a problem in Jude, you're a lunatic. This happens all the time where people get the mindset of Korah, and it's not enough for them to just go. I once sat on festival and said, you know, there's about 5 things one should do if you're going to leave a church. And the first one at the top of the list, go quietly. You came in the same way, go out the same way. Do yourself a favor and others, but more importantly, do God a favor. And what you do quickly and do it quietly, because no one wants to be, really it's a poison. Well, I don't like the way things are being run anymore. I'm not happy with that. Well, if you're not happy with that, no, I'm sorry, didn't I just say, how about sitting down and in decency, not indecent, in decency, spell out what it is and say that you're going to pray about this, but you want to bring this up. Now listen, my mailbox is not a garbage can for people to gripe. If I did that, we'd have a big shred bin, and that's what we do. We just shred them, because I happen to know it's a disease that permeates the ministry. You let one person, well, I don't really like that new song. That really bothers me, because I like that song we used to sing 50 years ago. because it sounds more church-like. This one is too rock-sounding, and you know what that can do to people. Oh, I don't like the guest singer we had last month. Did you see how they were dressed? Like as if you're some fashion police. Give me a break. It's church. Hello. Anyway, so you get the point. What's interesting here is 250 men are poisoned by Korah and Dathan and Abiram. Now, you say, well, why would the Reubenites even bend an ear? Well, maybe they had such an inferiority complex that they weren't part of the firstborn. They didn't get that blessing. And maybe when the whole camp moved, it was a stark reminder to them of the forfeiture branded onto their tribe forever. All right? So maybe that was under a few people's skin, and all it took was Korah to come and say, aren't you tired of being kind of like the donkey part of the movement here? Because you should really have a different position, seeing that you originally should have been part of that firstborn blessing. I don't know. It only takes some little, and usually it's a nebulous thing that then people start thinking about, yeah, you're right. I hadn't thought about that before, but, Korah's got a point. We should have a different position. We shouldn't be between Gad and Simeon. We should be at the front, where Judah is. That's where we ought to be. I don't know. I'm just saying. No one knows the rhyme or reason here. But it says that they rose up before Moses. Then read verse 3. And they gathered themselves together against Moses and against Aaron. So not enough for Korah to come and bring his grievances to Moses and Aaron, but let's outnumber Moses and Aaron, 253 of us, or how, if the number is 250 and the three of them, or whatever, let's outnumber. Gathered themselves together against Moses and against Aaron. And then before I read what they're going to say, let me just say this to you. This is the thing that bothers me all the time. I'm preaching to you. I'm preaching to some of the pastors that listen to me. I'm preaching to people, anyone who will listen. But I'm also telling you some of the things that it's mind-boggling to me. Moses got the instruction from God back there while they were in Egypt to go and deliver the people. Moses as a type of Christ, telling them how to put the blood on the doorpost, apply it, go inside, eat the roasted lamb for strength, be ready to go because, folks, tonight we're going out of Egypt. So, in fact, deliver. How could you, I'm sorry, forgive me, this is one that it's personal, gets under my skin. How could you ever, in your mind, in a right mind, come against somebody who delivered you out of Egypt? I'm not saying that the person who is, in Moses' case, he wasn't perfect. But how could you come against somebody who helped lead you out of Egypt's bondage? Even if they've changed over time and it's time for you to move on, why would you rise up against them? I'll put it for those of you who may be trailing along in the path here and you want it brought up to the now. How could you come against anybody who shows you the way of Christ and the shed blood required for salvation? Instead, if you have an issue, speak the truth in love, one-on-one, or leave quietly. But how could you rise up against the one, in this case, who delivered? This is mind-boggling to me. And only, by the way, I see this happen in the church frequently. People have an issue, and here it is. They gathered themselves together against Moses and against Aaron. And please, for the love of God, what did Aaron do? And if he did anything, he was more on the side of dumb and stupid by listening to them and making that molten calf that got them into a whole host of trouble, even though he was supposed to be priest and mouthpiece for Moses. But listen to what they say. And this is the one where if you don't read this right, you're going to pass right by this. I've done this 1,000 times, so forgive me. But they gather themselves against Moses and against Aaron and said unto them, Ye take too much upon you, seeing all the congregation are holy. Just stop right there. They're all holy. Now, we're living in a dispensation of the New Testament, and the blood of Christ washes and cleanses us from all sin. First Peter says we are a royal priesthood. There is no more priesthood like in this day that I'm looking at, because we look at the final sacrifice, one and only, sufficient for all mankind in Christ Jesus. Here, they didn't have that yet. And here, if you go back a little bit, you find out that there were certain people that crept in as strangers who did not know or who had not been brought out in the Exodus, who perhaps had not celebrated the memorial Passover. No, not all were holy. And the holy ones, in this case, were the ones that were dedicated to touch the things directly concerning God, the tabernacle, the moving of the tabernacle, the setting up of the tabernacle, the tools, the utensils, anything concerning the place where God's glory and grace, but in this case, glory would appear. So the first problem is a false statement. And it's always like this. People who have this defector mindset from the truth, they'll put a spin on something. He says they're all holy. The whole congregation is holy. Oh, wait a minute, I forgot. Were they holy when they made that calf? Was that holy? Was that all set apart for God? Because last time I checked, they were worshiping at a calf and not God. So I guess that's holy too. No, not in this time. The other thing, it says, every one of them are holy, and the Lord is among them. And then it says, wherefore then ye lift up yourselves above the congregation of the Lord. That is a lie. And this is something that happens again on a regular basis. Let's go back a little bit. Exodus 3, God is speaking to Moses, calls Moses. Well, Moses is on the backside of the desert, and he says, come off, the place where you're standing is holy, take off your shoes. And he spoke to him through the burning bush, and he gave him the instructions that he was going to go and he was going to deliver the people of God. Exodus 3 through Exodus 4, Moses gives at least 4 excuses of he doesn't want the job, he doesn't want, no, not me, I can't talk. What will I say? I can't do this, I'm not able to. Four different excuses. If you go there and look, 4 different things that he says to try and say, oh, no, not me, I can't do that. And it says the anger of the Lord was kindled against Moses because Moses is making all these excuses, at least 4 of them. Does that sound like a man who has self-appointed himself to the job? I don't think so either. And yet, it says that you lift yourselves up above the congregation of the Lord. Now, anybody who's familiar with Moses' calling and what Moses did right before this is what's so egregious about this. It's a lie. But you know what? There are people who will believe a lie quicker than they'll believe the truth. This is a lie. And why is it a lie? Because just a little bit earlier, before this Korah event, Moses sent out 70 elders and doing them with power that he had, essentially putting... Does that sound like a man who just says, no, it's only going to be me? That's what they're accusing him of. You're putting yourself up above the congregation. Only you. But if you read, Moses sent out 70 elders and he gave them it says he imparted unto them. Furthermore, if Moses was lording it over the congregation, which is basically the accusation here, then why is it when Joshua came and he said, Moses, there's 2 men over there and they're prophesying, and he says, I would to God that they would all prophesy. Does that sound like a man who doesn't want anybody else to partake in God's gifts? It's a lie. But then again, it's a disease that creeps into every church, and I don't care if the church is comprised of 20 people or 20,000. This creeps in anywhere. And you got to see that at least 250 important people, plus these 3 priests, or they're not really priests, but servants in the tribe of Levi, had enough, clout to convince, and we're going to go and start a rebellion. When Moses heard it, he fell upon his face. Furthermore, Moses is known as the meekest man, not milquetoast, but the meekest man. And he spake unto Korah, and all his company, saying, even tomorrow the Lord will show who are his and who is holy, and will cause him to come near unto him, even him whom he hath chosen will he cause to come near unto him. This is the instructions that Moses gives to this band. He says, this do, take ye censers, Korah and all of his company, put fire therein, put incense in them before the Lord tomorrow. And it shall be that the man whom the Lord doth choose shall be holy. Ye take too much upon you, ye sons of Levi. Now, let's kind of put a little bit of flesh and blood here. Do you remember what happened to Nadab and Abihu, the sons of Aaron, who went in, they used false fire? God killed them. So if I was just a listening ear in the camp, and I heard Moses' instructions to go get censers and fire, I'd already be shaking in my boots. Because something tells me, just hear me out. They're going to have to get the fire somewhere, and it ain't going to come off the holy altar. Let's think on these things. Moses said unto Korah, hear, I pray you, ye sons of Levi, seemeth it but a small thing unto you that the God of Israel hath separated you from the congregation of Israel to bring you near to himself, to do the service of the tabernacle of the Lord, and to stand before the congregation to minister unto them? In other words, you're basically treating this very special calling that you have in the service that you've been chosen for as insufficient and menial and trivial. And he says, and he hath brought thee near to him, and all thy brethren, the sons of Levi, with thee. And seek ye the priesthood also. So you want to stand in my place too? You've got all these responsibilities that God chose you. God said, I called you aside specifically, specially. And you want what I'm doing? Really? And this is another part of a problem, which is a reoccurring theme almost in every single church, I don't care big or small, which is minimalizing the work of the pastorate. Oh, I could do that. That's simple. Now listen, I've said many times from this pulpit, if you think you can carry the load that the pastor carries, raise your hand, knock yourself out. Because, I look at my late husband, he made it look easy. And you'd never think in a million years, but I was by his side when he would be up at 3 and 4 in the morning, still grappling with how to put together something for his message on Sunday morning. Yes, after 30 years, actually had 50 years of ministry all in all, but after 30 years of ministry, you'd think you can be on autopilot for a little bit, no? No. So this is a common thing. And not enough that you have your position, you want mine too. But I love what happens here. He says, for which cause both thou and all thy company are gathered together against the Lord. This is what I love, perspective of understanding. They gathered themselves against Moses and Aaron. Moses says, you have gathered yourselves together against the Lord. Now, until somebody abuses their position in the pulpit, and it happens a lot, friends. You hear it in the news, you hear about all these different scandals and things that have happened, and it gets abused quite a bit. But until somebody does that, and I believe there is no greater target usually put on somebody's back than the minister who stands, because Satan just desires to pick them off as he can. And some of them succumb quicker than others. Some of them never. Some will put up a fight and resist temptation. The devil flees from them. But all in all, Moses has it right. They didn't come with a grievance against Moses and Aaron. They came with a grievance against the Lord because the Lord appointed Moses and the Lord appointed Aaron. Moses sent to call Dathan and Abiram, the sons of Eliab, which said, we will not come up. Nope. We're not coming. You can tell Korah whatever you want. We're not coming. We're not coming. Do you understand? We're not coming. That is another trait of, we'll call it the apostate church or the acts of the apostates. big talkers, but when it comes time to stand up and be a man, usually they all run away. And this I've seen with my own eyes over the years. Yes, of course we have. People who like to talk big, they like to talk smack, especially the folks on the internet. They like to talk smack. But if they were standing right in front of me, I don't think they'd be doing that because there's just a lot of cowards. And I've said personally, the things that you say against me, you don't say them against me. You're saying them against God, because before I even took the pastorate, something was clear to me. You cannot develop that type of a hatred, which I saw, the few that actually had issues with Dr. Scott, you cannot develop that type of a hatred for somebody just in the sense of, oh, I hate that person. But even if you did, really, you got to be a real coward to stand out there in, we'll call it, the Disneyland universe. It's cartoon land. I can do whatever I want. But if you really were standing here, you probably wouldn't be opening your mouth. And if you did, you'd be a fool. Because a spiritual person understands spiritual principles, and a carnal person is at enmity against the things that are of God. Whether you like the container or not, that's really none of your business. Maybe they looked at Jesus and they said, he's a wine bibber and a glutton. Somebody maybe said, he's got that long hair, and he's wearing those darn Birkenstock slippers. He's a hippie. We only like the Roman-dressed people here. I don't know, all right? So I'm just, trying to keep us in this passage here. But Moses calls them and says to them to come, and they won't. Is it a small thing that thou hast brought us up out of the land that floweth with milk and honey? Brought us up out of the land that floweth with milk and honey. Are you a little confused? Because these individuals are saying that essentially they were brought out of Egypt, the land of milk and honey. Read it carefully. Is it a small thing that thou hast brought us up out of the land that floweth with milk and honey to kill us in the wilderness? The land of milk and honey is what they spied out when the spies came back and they said it's a good land. And they'd have to go in there and fight for it, but it's a good land. That was the promised land, not Egypt. This is another trait of apostate or apostatehood, if you will. That is, the world's ways and the world's things always, it's reversed. No, it's not better with Christ, and it's not better walking with the Lord, and it's not better praying, and it's not better fasting. It's better to be out there. That's the land of milk and honey, right? That's what they're saying. Just a little bit warped, in this case, a lot warped. Except thou make thyself altogether prince over us. So basically, you want to be king over us. It wasn't enough that you took us out of that, what they're calling Egypt, the land of milk and honey. You're confused. That was bondage. That was hell. That was... And you want to be made a king. And here's a man who says he didn't want to lead the people. You see how twisted this is? And this goes on all the time. You can read this passage and see that the devil has made sure that through the ages there have been Korahs, Dathans, Abirams. There have been people just like this with a rebellious and pernicious mind who would invent out of whole cloth, no, you took us out of that good land to bring us here? That's Egypt, in their mind, was the promised land. They had it all there. Moreover, thou hast not brought us into the land that flowed with milk and honey, or given us inheritance of fields and vineyards. You haven't done that. Moses, you lied. You promised us that you were going to do this, and that, and you lied. And this is where I love the Bible. You know why? Because the Bible actually comes to life, if you look close enough, in your life and in mine. Moses was trying to lead the people into the land, but because of the people's stiff-neckedness, they wandered for 40 years, a journey that could have just taken, I don't know, not that long, 40 years, and most of their bones, it says, were strewn in the wilderness, and they didn't enter in. Not because of Moses. In fact, Moses didn't make it in because of the people, but had the people not done what they did, Moses would have led them in. Instead, God raised up Joshua, and Joshua led those that were able to enter in to go in. But just think about this. They're accusing him of something, say, well, you didn't do what you said you were going to do. And I don't know about you, but I've heard this thing lots over the years. People saying, well, pastor didn't say what she said she was going to do this and she hasn't done. Well, last time I checked, I haven't been at this work for 40 years. And last time I checked, some of you are more like the children of Israel, constantly complaining and not looking at the progress being made. And if you'd actually shut your mouth, get behind me and march, we might make it there quicker and get a lot more done. I tell it like it is, folks. If you want stained glass tones, go somewhere else. I'm going to tell you the sobering fact is that this is ministry. And ministry comes with a lot of having people who get disgruntled because in their mind, they think that a promise, and sometimes it's not even words I've said, it's made out of whole cloth. But if it is something I've said, they expect for it to happen immediately. Well, this passage puts it all well in perspective. Moses didn't get it accomplished, and it was their problem that they wandered for 40 years, not Moses. Moses is not to blame. God said, nope, go over here. Look at the map, look at a Bible map, and look where they journeyed for 40 years. Almost there, let's turn around, let's go back over here. Now let's go over there, let's go over here, let's go over that hill, let's go back down there. Twisting and turning everywhere. It's like God was saying, you are going to spin out there in that dry land until you get some sense in your brain, which they didn't. And God said, well, okay, the ones that can go in will go in, which were not that many, by the way, I don't think. Well, let's go on here. And so they're saying he's lied, not brought them into the land flowing with milk and honey, or given us an inheritance of fields and vineyards. Wilt thou put out the eyes of these men? We will not come up. And Moses was very wroth and said unto the Lord, respect not thou their offering. Don't take it, don't look at it, don't accept it. I have not taken one ass from them, neither have I hurt one of them. Moses said unto Korah, I like this, be thou and all thy company before the Lord, thou and they and Aaron, tomorrow, and take every man his censer, and put incense in them, and bring ye before the Lord every man his censer, 250 censers, thou also, and Aaron, each of you his censer. And they took every man his censer, put fire in them, laid incense thereon, stood in the door of the tabernacle of the congregation with Moses and Aaron. This is what I love. Read this verse 19. I circled the words in here multiple times because this is always the way it is. The people who are going to rebel become super spiritual. They over-spiritualize. Here is verse 19. Korah gathered all the congregation against them under the door of the tabernacle of the congregation. Hey, look, this is our workplace here. This is what we do here. You all line up here because we're important. We deal with the things of God, and you know that God's glory is about to descend here. But if it wasn't for us setting up all this stuff, this wouldn't be made possible. So you all get over here with us. What does it say? The glory of the Lord appeared unto all the congregation. And the Lord spake unto Moses and unto Aaron, saying, separate yourselves from among this congregation, that I may consume them in a moment. I like it. And they fell on their faces and said, O God, the God of the spirits of all flesh, shall one man sin, and wilt thou be wroth with all the congregation? The Lord spake unto Moses, saying, speak unto the congregation, saying, get you up from about the tabernacle of Korah, Dathan, and Abiram. And Moses rose up and went unto Dathan and Abiram, and the elders of Israel followed him. And he spake unto the congregation, saying, depart, I pray you, from the tents of these wicked men, and touch nothing of theirs, lest ye be consumed in all their sins. Now the New Testament says, you mark those people who cause division among you, and you avoid them. You stay away from them. And you might think, why? Why? Well, in the old, God will demonstrate why, and in the new, it's so that you're not a partaker of their judgment. So they got up from the tabernacle of Korah, Dathan, and Abiram on every side, and Dathan and Abiram came out, stood in the door of their tents, and their wives and their sons and their little children. And Moses said, "Hereby you shall know that the Lord hath sent me to do all these works, for I have not done them in my own mind. If these men die, the common death of all men, or if they be visited after the visitation of all men, then the Lord hath not sent me. But if the Lord make a new thing, and the earth open her mouth, and swallow them up," I love this, "with all that appertaineth unto them, and they go down quick into the pit, then ye shall understand that these men have provoked the Lord." And it came to pass, as he made an end of speaking all these words, the ground clave asunder that was under them. First of all, the test of a true prophet is, do his words come to pass? Presto! That's number one. Number two, I often think, when it says the ground clave, I often think that while all this was going on, sometimes I used to think it might have been like a mighty earthquake. In this case, I actually think it was almost like the earth was yawning, going, like, I'm bored. Like God was saying, okay, I'm bored already. And there goes the opening, right? Like a giant yawn. The earth opened her mouth, swallowed them up, and their houses, and all the men that appertained unto Korah, and all their goods. And they and all that appertained to them went down alive into the pit, and the earth closed upon them, and they perished from among the congregation. I would say that God was on Moses' side, wouldn't you? I would say that. And all Israel that were round about them fled at the cry of them, and said, "Lest the earth swallow us up also." And there came a fire from the Lord, consumed the 250 men that offered incense. And the Lord spake unto Moses, "Speak unto Eleazar the son of Aaron the priest, that he take up the censers out of the burning, and scatter thou the fire yonder, for they are hallowed. The censers of these sinners against their own souls, let them make them broad plates for a covering of the altar, for they offered them before the Lord, therefore they are hallowed, and they shall be a sign unto the children of Israel." And it says that he took the brazen censers wherewith that they had offered the burnt had offered, and made broad plates for a covering of the altar. And these plates, think about it, hammered into plates, added to the altar, that God's fire would always be burning upon them. I think that's something remarkable. When it says to be a memorial unto the children of Israel, that no stranger, which is not of the seed of Aaron, come near to offer incense before the Lord, that he be not as Korah and as his company. But it wasn't enough. So you might think, well, this is where the story ends, but it doesn't. Seeds like this that are planted usually leave behind more bad fruit. And this is why I tell you, and I'm going to tell you as your pastor, but as someone who has seen over the years and knows a little bit about how this works. It takes one person to spread some poison, and whether it's towards me or pastor, or whether it's towards an individual in gossip, it doesn't matter. It takes one individual to get it going. In this case, Korah and his band were 250. The people saw, but it wasn't enough that they saw, because now there's this after effect that's still going on in the camp. And this is what's disturbing, because you might think, oh, well, the story ends with God closing up the earth, and like a giant burp, it's finished. But it's not finished. It doesn't end there. But on the morrow, all the congregation of Israel murmured against Moses and against Aaron, saying, "Ye have killed the people of the Lord." You killed them. Now, maybe if Moses was out there and they dug a giant pit, come on, Aaron, keep digging. Come on, we're going to throw the people in the pit. God opened the earth, and they're accusing Moses. You did this thing. That's why I said sometimes ministry is just, you get blamed for everything. You get blamed for the good, the bad, and the ugly. Somebody gets a blessing. Oh, thank you for praying for me. Somebody has some Kabbalah fall on them. Oh, it's pastor's fault. Didn't pray enough. Didn't think enough about it. Didn't whatever. It's always like that. So they murmured against Moses and against Aaron. you've killed the people of the Lord. And it came to pass when the congregation was gathered against Moses and against Aaron, that they looked toward the tabernacle of the congregation, and behold, the cloud covered it. I love this. Every time the people come against Moses, a cloud appears. It's the Lord, right? The glory of the Lord appeared. It's as if the Lord's there all the time, but he lets things get to a point, and then he appears. In this case, he appears in a cloud, kind of, I would think, like arms folded, like, okay. I just kind of envision God kind of appearing like this. It's kind of cool, arms and legs. I'm sorry to anthropomorphize him, but, just kind of standing there like that, like, okay, you're going to keep talking now? You're seriously going to keep flapping your jaw, you people out there? I think that's the cloud is not just, oh, it's a cloud. God's there, right? And Moses and Aaron came before the tabernacle of the congregation. The Lord spake unto Moses, saying, get you up from among this congregation, that I may consume them, as in a moment. And they fell upon their faces. Again, God says, I want to just blot them out. Moses said unto Aaron, take a censer, put fire therein from off the altar, put on incense, and go quickly unto the congregation, and make an atonement for them, for there is wrath gone out from the Lord, the plague is begun. And Aaron took as Moses commanded, ran into the midst of the congregation. Behold, the plague was begun among the people. And he put on incense, made an atonement for the people. And he stood between the dead and the living, and the plague was stayed. And Aaron here acting as a type of Christ in his activities. And it says, now they that died in the plague were 14,700, besides them that died in the matter of Korah. And Aaron returned unto Moses unto the door of the tabernacle of the congregation, and the plague was stayed. And if you still want to continue just a little bit, and I'll summarize it, because the 17th chapter begins with basically Moses saying, okay, we're going to sort out here by the word of the Lord and by God's activity who's really in charge. And we're going to settle this matter so that you can stop your complaining once and for all. Out of the 12 tribes, you bring 12 dead sticks and bring them into the tabernacle. One of these, the one that flowers overnight, that buds overnight, this is the one that God has chosen to be his appointed representative, and once that's established, shut your mouth. There was only one rod that budded, it was Aaron's, and basically the end of this is, it says, if you read in verse 10, the Lord said unto Moses, bring Aaron's rod again before the testimony to be kept for a token against the rebels. And thou shalt quite take away their murmuring from me, that they die not. So takes a little seed that begun somewhere back there with Korah, that kept going with 250 princes of Reuben, that kept on going with the people of the congregation until God said, okay, we're going to settle this matter once and for all. This is the person I appointed. And God was ready to wipe out the people. Now you might say to me, well, what on earth does this have to do? Because Jude's book talks about the gainsaying of Korah. And why? Let's turn there. Let's turn to Jude, so I can bring this to a close. Why? Ask yourself the question, why did Jude write this out of chronological order? Cain is first, Korah should be second, Balaam should be third. And there's a reason why. And it's very plain to anybody who's trying to read into what Jude was trying to get at by putting Korah last out of chronological order. Cain, as I've said before, hater of God's way. Balaam, the prophet for hire, as we said, he ended up being back at a place he shouldn't have been, which means he probably went back for money, for gain. And here, those that Jude is referring to, the gainsaying of Korah, the rebellion of Korah. And Korah is put last, not to highlight the sin of Korah, but the judgment of God upon those. Because, remember, I've labeled this epistle, the Acts of the Apostates, to put into the minds of those intended readers that there will be a consequence. On the day when we all stand, there will be a consequence. There will be judgment meted out. He's highlighted Korah last, that it might stay in the people's minds that there will be a consequence for these people coming in and doing this heinous act or activity unto the church of God, the church of Jesus Christ. Now, if you don't think, I said Cain killed his brother, so he's a murderer. He's the type of the first false religion. Cain also represents a hater of God's way. You talk about Balaam, who seems to be vacillating, ends up dying. Cain is exiled, essentially sent as a life of a fugitive. Balaam is killed when they come back to slay the kings. And Korah is swallowed up in the earth. It's as if Jude is saying there will be a consequence for these things. We tend to not... the church, we preach grace. I do believe God's grace. There is no grace but. The people in Moses' day thought that God appearing was because of their acts of holiness. God appeared because he's a God of grace and mercy. God appeared because he's God and he could in the presence of dirty, filthy sinners. Not because they merited it, because it was grace even then, and it's still grace today, and there's grace for the worst of sinners. There are people that go into ministry, and I'm sure they start with the intent of helping people. And then they realize it's tough. Feeding the machine, as I've said, where people say, well, you have to have money to go out there and do these things and get people to buy your products or support you in your endeavors or your projects. And suddenly it becomes a business and a machine. And the main reason, the fundamental at the end of the day reason, is what I began with. We're all going to make the journey. Whether you're listening to me, and don't be scared if you're 12 years old and you're listening and saying, what's she talking about, journey? I don't want to go on another trip with my parents. That was hell, right? We're all going to make the journey, though. When we were teenagers, we thought to be 30 was ancient. And when we turned 30, we thought 60 was, wow, out of the park. You turn 50 and you go, wow, I'm past the halfway point. Most people don't make it to 100. And you realize that time is just clicking on. And the reason for standing here every single week and highlighting this type of a book is to say exactly what Jude said. Keep yourself in the love of God. How do you do that? You stay in the Word. You keep praying. You keep fighting the good fight of faith. You recognize that there are people who desire to corrupt and pervert the church, and maybe their initial we'll call it intention, was to do good for the people of God, but it becomes perverted and ultimately brings people into a defection mode where they're disgruntled. Like Korah, they'd rather say, well, what do you think? You're the only one that can do this? That's why I told you, don't consider going into ministry unless you feel a burden to get out there and do something. And when you get out there, you don't get out and say, well, I'm getting out like the Wild West, and you realize, oh, what am I supposed to do while I'm out here? The people who I have known have really had a burden. Do you know how I know that they really had a burden? They came to me and asked me in that moment, please pray for me because I feel like I should be doing this thing, but I'm here and I'm supporting you and I have this burden now to go out and do this thing. You know how many, I can tell you, can count on one hand the ones that came that actually had a burden, where halfway during the conversation somehow both of us ended up on our hands and knees crying out to God, crying to help to enter in, to understand for that individual. But that person didn't leave as an enemy, and they didn't leave like Korah trying to usurp 250 princes out of the church. They left, and they're still friends and synergois, fellow laborers in the Lord. And periodically, I'll get a little nudge that says, Pastor, I'm in a bind. What should I do now? You don't cease to look at the person who's brought you along at least a part of the trip and then turn around and say, you filthy rat, I'm going to do my own thing, all because your pride and your ego is so big that you won't humble yourself to listen to what God is saying through that individual to help you make your journey and your walk with Him all that it should be in the now for when you stand in front of Him later. So when I say to you there's a purpose under the sun for this book, there surely is. And I thank God that we're looking at it, and I realize that the more I look at all of this, I think to myself, unfortunately, this will keep going until the church keeps, when the day the church is gone, these folks will, I'm sure, disappear, or they'll be the ones that are following the Antichrist, because the Antichrist will have a better church than any church here, and they'll be deceived by it all. But in the meantime, the few who are able to recognize Pastor Scott or Dr. Scott or any person standing in the pulpit who has a genuine burden for the people of God, focusing on their salvation in Jesus Christ and learning the Word together, don't pick at my imperfections because I got too many of them. You'll spend all your time picking and all of your time focused on those things and not the things that count for eternity, which is you and your relationship with the Lord, and gleaning from the things that I say to help you press close and to not be lured away by those apostate minds that come in with a deliberate attempt to persuade you that you are not learning and you are not growing, but you're wasting your time in what you're doing. They came in Jude's day. They're still coming today. And this is why when Jude says that you should earnestly contend for the faith which was once delivered unto the saints, I'm telling you, keep contending, keep agonizing, keep fighting. It will be well worth it when he says to you, enter in, well done, enter in, good and faithful servant. Put your name right there. That's my message. I'm Pastor Melissa Scott, pastor of Faith Center, Glendale, California. I teach every Sunday morning at 11 a.m. If you'd like to attend services with us, simply call the 800 number, that is 800-338-3030, to join us. If you'd like to watch, listen, and learn 24 hours a day, simply log on to our website at www.pastormelissascott.com.